The idea to start a short-term study tour in Japan was not initially met with enthusiasm. Studying other cultures can be very valuable, but many people believe doing so takes time, years of cultural immersion and study. The study tours are merely a few weeks. Is this enough time to offer a meaningful learning experience to students hoping to see Japan firsthand? And more importantly, how can a short-term trip be conducted in order to provide the most valuable educational experience?
I was sort of thinking that a short-term trip didn't have much value, that you had to go do a semester or even better, a year. So I started out being a little skeptical. So I think I've really pushed really hard to keep it an academic experience, to keep those academic questions right up there in front of our eyes when we're traveling. So it's not just all like, how many subway stops are there, like memorizing statistics or something, but really developing the thinking as well as the knowledge about Japan in particular, to learn just observing. And having the students involved, I think, is a good life skill. Being able to go someplace really different, even if you don't speak the language, and to know that you can survive, to know that you can learn about another culture in such a different way being there compared to being in a classroom. I think those are skills and knowledge that are applicable in lots of different contexts. Just if you're there for a semester, with at least our programs in Japan, you're sort of forced to become more independent. You certainly aren't going to get to be bicultural in 2 weeks. I mean, you're not really going to be bicultural in a semester either. But you move closer to that level of comfort if you're there longer. And I think there are bits of it that you get on the study tour. Like, let's say even something as simple as riding trains. At first everybody's excited about the trains, and after you've done it for 2 weeks, it's like, oh yeah, this is old hat. And then it's not until you come back to the United States, to Cleveland, where you don't ride trains anymore, you say, oh, that was a really good system. There are different levels of being immersed. So you can be immersed in Japan at the level of just everybody gets up in the morning, you're going to walk to the train station, get on a train, you learn how to read, where you want to go and how to put the cards in, and after a while it just becomes very ordinary, right? So at that level, by experiencing it over and over again, you have been immersed in public transportation in Japan. So that piece of it, I think, you can experience in a short time. I think it's a good thing to do, and I wasn't convinced at the beginning, but I am now totally convinced that it's worth doing.
Travel has been used as an educational technique for many years. The Japan Study Tour at John Carroll can be seen as an adaptation of this technique. It is an opportunity for students to venture outside of their comfort zone so that they may see the objects of their studies firsthand, but also to learn about another culture, and furthermore, to learn about themselves. It is a sense of global cultural awareness that allows us to reevaluate our own place in the world.
In Japanese education, there's a lot of group responsibility for learning. And that's very much what Japanese tourism, Japanese travel has been for centuries. That, like a religious pilgrimage, which was a sort of maybe excuse for young people to travel from villages to these famous places around Japan. And it was almost, for some, at some points in history, like a rite of passage. You go off on this trip away from your family, away from your village, with other people in your village, and you see these famous places, days before they had internet or even television or things like that. Exposing them to the broader world was certainly educational. It was religious in the sense that that was at least the nominal reason for going, and fun. You get away from all the daily responsibilities that you have, working on your parents' farm or whatever, and be able to be with friends, other young people from your village, and just be sort of free from all that everyday life. So I think that was there, and I think it probably works for American students today too.
The Japan Study Tour uses what is called the EMIC model, which is derived from Japanese education. It encourages cooperation between the students and gives them a part of the responsibility in planning the trip. By doing this, students become more engaged in the activities and can ultimately benefit from the trip in a more personal way. Consequently, teachers are given a less traditional role, where they are seen less like instructors and more like participants.
The role of teacher in relation to the students is a little bit different in that they're not always directive. They maybe provide the frame or provide the boundaries for what can be done, and then to try to encourage students to think through and to work together and to plan. In order to be able to accomplish the task of planning, they have to do some reading, they have to do some research. And so they come with background knowledge that if we just said, okay, we're going to go to this temple in this castle, here's your reading assignment. I think I'm realistic enough to know that, people might take a look at it, but you learn it in a different way when you have that responsibility. So we thought that if our students are doing it, first of all, they would be more engaged and therefore hopefully more committed to the activities if they themselves had planned them. Using that Japanese school trip planning to give them that experience of the Japanese group educational model.
From my own experience, I can say that the EMIC model works. Being in Japan at the places that we chose to see was fun, exciting, and unavoidably educational. Even places intended for other students' research were nothing less than enthralling. It was no secret that everybody on the trip was enjoying themselves, even when it meant having to get out of bed in the early hours of the morning.
And this year was really funny too in the planning. It's like nobody was doing a topic that particularly called for them going to the fish market. Nobody's doing food even, I don't think, this time. So there's really no reason to go there based on research interests. And so, as they're reading the guidebooks and there's the general wish list, somebody put it on. It's like, well, that's really early in the morning. And, almost like tried to discourage them. It's like, no, we want to go. Like, okay, we're going to the fish market at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah, and we would not have planned it because we know it's not a natural time for people to be up and out and running around. And then it's a long day after that till you can sort of collapse. I think it's great that they want to go to the fish market, but it's that difference that you're saying they're the ones who want to go to the fish market, and they're the ones who will get up and enjoy it, because it's not something that we wanted to especially push them toward.
The research and planning are very important to having a successful trip, but the unplanned experiences are just as much of an importance. You go to Japan expecting to see the Golden Pavilion or Osaka Castle, but what you don't expect will surprise you and stay with you forever.
I think every time students are surprised when the middle school kids approach them for their autographs and to, quote, practice English with them. And that's always so much fun to see, especially the first time it happens on the trip when it's just fun and you feel important. By the time it's like the fifth place you've been to and you've already signed your autograph and answered the same questions 20 times, maybe it gets old. But that's really a fun thing to see. Staying at Kei's house in Kyoto, there's a lot of people from Europe and Australia who stay there, and I think meeting people from other countries who are also visiting Japan is an interesting experience. That's certainly not planned into anybody's schedule. We want students to plan and be prepared, but you don't want to be so planned and prepared that you're not open to these sort of opportunistic experiences too.
One of these unplanned moments is a favorite memory of mine, and I just had to share it with Dr. Long. You talk about the unplanned moments that the kids kind of go off on their own to explore, and discovering that the public transportation stops at midnight, and that was just so funny because we had that. I'm sure every group when they go over has that same experience, but we went to Akihabara, which is not probably the place to go.
That's like the other side of Tokyo from where we're staying too.
That's where we went. We went to Akihabara. I'm not sure why we thought that was the place to be, but we didn't know any better. So we went there, and the whole city was closed.
We're in Akihabara, but everything's closed. We have to get back. So we're going to end up paying $4,000 for a taxi ride to get back to our hostel.
and
How
it was
did you
just.
get back? By cab?
We were thinking we were going to use the train, but then when you see everybody jammed in there, like I mean, I
It's
didn't
like the
know
last
that many
train of
human
the
beings
night.
could be in a space that close together. It was incredible. So we were like, no, we're not doing that. We're not jamming ourselves in there. So you know, a little bit of thinking, and finally we just had to call a cab to come take us.
The trick, in a way, is to get people to be open to the unplanned experiences, for them to have enough background so that they're not frightened by a different experience than what's planned. So I think the kind of general engagement in trip planning hopefully helps with that.
Those unplanned moments can be some of the best. And the most valuable piece of advice I could give somebody planning on attending the study tour is to be open to those moments. Take in everything you can, because everything has something valuable to offer.